My fiancé had a bachelor party the night before the wedding and spent the night with his first love. I didn't cry or make a scene. I wore my wedding dress and attended the wedding as usual. Except, at the wedding, I gave the ring to another man. Eric thought I was just acting out, so he paraded around with a young girl to make me jealous. He called me, saying, "You can still come back. I can break up with her." But then Simon, his nemesis, answered from my phone, "Helen's pregnant. Stop bothering her." I stood on the stage with Eric, dressed in my gorgeous wedding gown. The officiant held the rings and read out the vows. "Mr. Eric, do you take Helen as your wife, no matter?" Eric held my hand and couldn't wait to shout into the mic, "I do. Helen, I do." The audience applauded. But he didn't notice the makeup on his collar rubbing off, revealing a hickey on his neck. I forced a smile and stayed silent. The officiant then asked me, "Helen, do you take Eric as your husband, no matter?" Not willing, I cut him off directly. Eric looked at me, confused. "What are you saying?" I said, "I'm not willing," I repeated. "Stop joking," he demanded. The audience started murmuring. Eric's face darkened. He grabbed the ring and tried to put it on my hand, insisting, "You've been looking forward to today for so long." Until last night, I really had looked forward to this wedding. But last night, at his so-called bachelor party, Eric kissed his first love. She straddled him, and they made out passionately. Someone asked him, "You're marrying Helen tomorrow. How do you feel?" He replied, "Don't ruin the fun by mentioning that. But you chased Helen for so long." Eric replied, "Finally got her, but now she's boring. But if she wants to get married, fine by me." Then, Eric and his first love left early and booked a room at the hotel next door. When I received that video, all my anticipation and joy turned into overwhelming sadness. I shook and vomited until I was weak and almost fainted. But I didn't confront Eric in the morning. I still got up, wore my wedding dress, had the makeup artist doll me up, and showed up at the wedding looking my best. Just for this moment, to humiliate him in front of everyone. "Had fun with Jessie last night?" I asked Eric. His face changed immediately. "I can explain about last night. But let's finish the wedding first, okay?" "No," I said, looking him in the eye, "we are breaking up. From today, we're done, Eric." His face turned black, and he grabbed my hand. "After making a scene like this, who would want you now?" I looked at him. There was no happiness or love in his eyes, just anger for losing face. He wanted to complete the wedding not out of love, but to save his pride. I pulled my hand back. Then what if I give myself to someone else? I glanced down the stage and saw Simon, Eric's nemesis. When I put the ring on his finger, I was more nervous than when I rejected Eric. My friend Rena had told me Simon wasn't interested in women, probably dated many. Thought asking him for help would be the best choice. Before Simon could react, I said, "I know you don't like women, but please help me. Take me away." Simon looked at me silently for a long time. When I thought he would push me away, he suddenly asked, "No regrets?" I thought he meant canceling the wedding, and I shook my head firmly, "No regrets." "Your word." He held my hand back firmly and led me out. His steady figure gave a strong sense of security. Eric yelled from the stage, "Simon, what do you mean by this?" Simon didn't even turn his head. "Handle it." His assistant went forward immediately. I got in Simon's car. The huge wedding dress almost filled the entire back seat. Away from the bustling venue, sorrow overwhelmed me. It wasn't that I missed Eric. I just felt heartbroken for the 5 years I spent with him. I thought we would have a happy ending, but it turned out to be this humiliating mess. Tears flowed uncontrollably at the same time. The car's partition rose. Simon handed me a tissue, without saying much. The more I cried, the more comfort I found somehow. Exhausted from crying, I asked Simon to have a few drinks with me. He took me directly to his winery. He quietly accompanied me, not saying a word. Midway through, my friend Lily called. I was a bit tipsy and put her on speaker. Did you really run off with Simon from your wedding? You finally got something good. Since you took him, just spend the night with him. I was so shocked I hiccuped and quickly hung up the phone. Sorry Simon, my friend was speaking nonsense, I said, wobbling as I stood up. Thanks for today, I'll head home now. But I ended up overestimating my alcohol tolerance. When I tried to stand up, my legs felt like jelly, and I fell straight into Simon's arms. I don't even know how things escalated to this point. Simon just kissed me, forcefully and dominantly, and I couldn't resist. My wedding dress got torn to pieces. With the last of my strength, I pushed him away and finally managed to catch my breath. He looked at me, his eyes full of possessiveness. You just let me put a ring on you in front of everyone, and now you're having second thoughts? Or are you still thinking about Eric? My head was spinning, but I shook it immediately. Eric was dead to me since the night he slept with his first love. Simon said, good. Then he completely ripped off my wedding dress. Wait. No more waiting. Simon couldn't wait anymore. He picked me up, and I clung to him with all my limbs. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. He was already coming on top of me. I felt like a tiny boat rocking on the water, the oar dipping in and out of the water with increasing speed. The faster the oar moved, the more the boat was propelled forward, as if it was being hit by a fierce storm. The shaking made me dizzy, and it threw the boat to the highest wave. I curled my toes, couldn't help but moan, and bit down hard on Simon's shoulder. At that moment, the storm reached its peak, tossing the boat up high and then crashing it down hard. Finally, the storm subsided after a long while. I nearly blacked out. Simon grunted with satisfaction, kissed my forehead, and mumbled something. Something like, Helen, I've waited for this day for so long. But I couldn't hear it clearly. With the delicate fabric on the ground and the fragrance of wine filling the air, it felt like I was lost in a drunken, wild dream. But soon, Simon's actions made it clear this was no dream. All night long, I barely had a chance to breathe. When I woke up, my whole body was sore beyond belief. My phone had countless missed calls from Eric, along with numerous messages. I didn't want to look at any of them. Simon had already left for work. But he was thoughtful, leaving me clean clothes and some food. He even called in a personal butler for me to command. Though, I didn't really need any of it. Having just left a failed relationship, I didn't plan to stay, nor did I plan to get tied up with Simon. After letting my family know I was safe, I headed straight from the winery to the airport. Without a specific destination, I just picked the next available flight. Before boarding, I thought for a moment and sent Simon a message. Thank you. Then I took out my domestic SIM card. For over 2 months, I traveled alone. It wasn't until Lily's birthday approached that I booked a flight back home. Lily had her birthday party outdoors. At first, it was just a few of us close friends. Unexpectedly, Eric showed up with his first love. Lily was furious. I didn't invite him. The nerve of him. I'll kick him out right now. I stopped her. No worries, today's your birthday. No need to ruin it over this. We'll just ignore him. But after a few drinks, Eric made a scene. Staggering over, he said, Helen, come home with me, please. I took a step back, looking at him coldly. Eric, maybe you forgot, but we broke up. But I never agreed to it. He stared at me intensely. So, you're still my fiancé? Suddenly, there was clapping behind me. Simon approached. First time I've heard a breakup needs mutual consent. Eric's face turned sour. Why do you keep butting into things between Helen and me, Simon? What I do is none of your business. Simon stood next to me, separating me from Eric. The heavy smell of alcohol vanished, replaced by the fresh scent of pine. Ready to go? He asked me. I didn't hesitate. Yeah, let's go. Behind us, Eric's friends commented, seems like Helen really doesn't fancy you anymore. Is she with Simon now? Eric protested, no way. Simon doesn't like women. Helen's just doing this to piss me off. The more she acts up, the more she still cares about me. Just wait. I know how to make her come back to me. Ignoring Eric's nonsense, I realized his outburst had left me little appetite. Looking over at Simon, who showed no sign of leaving, I politely asked, "I'm going to get some food. Want to join?" The result was us sitting at a street stall together. The noisy surroundings and thick smoke from the grill clashed with Simon's expensive suit. Yet he sat there calmly, not even flinching when placing his costly suit on a cheap plastic stool. When the barbecue arrived, I said, "You don't have to force yourself if you don't want to eat this." Simon glanced at me, picked up a skewer, and ate it. "It's pretty good." I remembered when I was with Eric. Getting tired of restaurant food, I sometimes wanted to have something different like street food. But he always found it dirty. "Helen, we have money. No need to eat that stuff." To me, eating street food wasn't about money. One time on my birthday, he reluctantly agreed to try a street vendor's barbecue with me. From the moment we sat down, his brows furrowed tightly, and he wiped the stool multiple times before sitting. Seeing him struggle to eat, I suggested, "If you can't eat it, don't force yourself. I can eat alone." "No," I said, "I'd join you, so I will." The next day, he got gastritis. While caring for him, I felt incredibly guilty, tears welling up in my eyes. Eric didn't hold back, constantly chastising me. "I told you it wasn't clean, but you insisted. If you had listened, I wouldn't be like this. Hope you've learned your lesson not to be so willful." In that moment, my guilt reached its peak. After that, I always followed his food preferences. My thoughts returned to the present. Most of the barbecue on the table was already gone. As I watched Simon pick up the last skewer, I quickly snatched it from his hand and stuffed it into my mouth. "You eat more, you pay," I said. He responded matter-of-factly, "You sleep, I run. What's the big deal about treating me to some barbecue?" I was so shocked that I started choking and coughing. Simon calmly handed me a bottle of water, his eyes full of amusement. But the next day, Simon's assistant told me that Simon had an upset stomach and was hospitalized. Remembering the shadow cast by the previous Eric incident, the first thing I did when I entered the hospital room was to apologize to Simon. "I am sorry." Simon, with an IV drip in his hand, leaned against the hospital bed. "Why are you apologizing? The food was my choice. It has nothing to do with you. I'm an adult, I know the consequences of my actions." He looked at me, a bit helpless. "I didn't want to ruin your mood. But it seems like I messed things up. I should be the one apologizing." I was taken aback for a moment, remembering Eric's accusatory words from before. Right. He's an adult. Of course, he knew that saying those hurtful things to me would only make me more sad and guilty. But he still said them. He just wanted to punish me, to make me follow his words. Just then, my phone rang. It was Gavin, Eric's good buddy, who knew me quite well too. "Helen, Eric has a fever and there's no medicine at home. Can you buy some medicine and check on him?" His voice echoed, probably on speakerphone. Eric was likely listening. I said, "Why don't you ask the girl who was on top of him the night before the engagement to bring the medicine? And by the way, Gavin, Eric and I already broke up. Didn't you know that? So, don't come to me for anything related to him again." On the other end, a cup shattered. Eric gritted his teeth. "Helen, my patience is limited. Take the hint and don't push it." I sneered and was about to speak. Simon suddenly called out to me, "Helen, the 4 is done. Can you call the doctor?" I was a bit puzzled. His assistant was right next to him, and there was a call button by the bed. Why was he calling me? In the next second, Eric shouted furiously, "Helen! You'd rather take care of Simon than come see me?" Ah, so he wanted to provoke Eric. I played along, replying, "Yes, what's the problem?" Eric got even angrier, "Don't think I can't manage without you. I can find countless others like you." I couldn't be bothered with his raving, so I hung up on him. Meanwhile, Gavin held the disconnected phone, looking conflicted. "Eric, if you truly want to win Helen back, you should speak gently to her. The more you act like this, the less willing she'll be to come back. Besides, Gavin swallowed, you were in the wrong. You were about to get married, yet you still had to mess around with Jesse. Eric frowned. I got drunk that night, and Jesse was so forward. What could I do? Besides, it was just one time. What's the big deal? In that situation, who could refuse their first love? I made a mistake that every man in the world makes. I still love Helen, isn't that enough? What else does she want from me? Should I kneel and beg for her to come back? Gavin sighed, feeling helpless. I'm just saying, if Helen really leaves one day, don't cry to me. Eric's eyes hardened. Run? With whom? Simon? He's no saint either. You think he likes Helen? He's just using her as a stand-in. Although Simon didn't blame me, I still frequently visited him in the hospital these past few days. One day, while I was peeling an apple for Simon, Lily called. Did you get back with Eric? She asked. I was confused. What? She sent me a picture of Eric holding another girl, kissing her. The girl only showed half of her face. But both that half face and her dressing style looked a lot like me. So much so that even I did a double take, doubting it was myself. Lily also screenshot the comments below. Did you get back with Helen? Looks like you won the bet. Helen still came back to you. See, Helen can't live without you. Eric himself left a vague comment. Of course, she'll always be mine. He didn't explain that the girl wasn't me. Instead, he deliberately let everyone misunderstand. That girl isn't me. I replied to Lily, Eric is doing it on purpose. He wants everyone to think that woman is me. Lily sighed with relief over the phone. That's good. I thought you got back with that jerk. I have something to confess. When you went abroad for a break, Simon came to ask me about your whereabouts. He offered a lot, so I told him. But rest assured, it's just Simon. If anyone else asked, no matter the amount, I wouldn't have told them. Every time you moved, Simon flew to check on you. Did you really not run into him abroad? I paused. I indeed hadn't seen Simon and had no idea about this. I looked up at him. He was standing very close to me. Lily's voice was loud. Simon heard everything she said clearly. I rushed to tell Lily we should meet and then hung up the phone. I did visit you, Simon explained, looking at me. But I didn't intend to disturb you. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. At that moment, my nose tingled with emotion. Traveling alone in a foreign land, saying I've never felt lonely or scared would be a lie. But knowing now that someone accompanied me in every new place made everything seem complete. It felt like the only flaw in the entire trip had been perfectly filled. My once silent heart started to beat faster again and again. After that, I talked to Eric. I asked him to clarify that the people in the pictures he posts are not me. Eric said, I never said she was you. They guessed. I have no control over their thoughts. I don't have the time to explain to each person, and whether I explain or not is up to me. I squinted my eyes and said, Eric, don't push your luck. He replied, Helen, just come back to me, and everything will be fine. I told you, we're already broken up. But you still follow my Twitter, right? Isn't that because you still care about me? I found him ridiculous. What do you want? The day after tomorrow, Eric said, come celebrate my birthday with me, and we'll talk in person. Eric loves crowds. He always invites lots of people to his birthdays. The private room was packed when I pushed the door open. They were all gathered around Eric, talking. Helen truly wants to reconcile with you. Look at the expensive gift she gave. It's Eric, after all. Women always end up bowing to him. Eric was fiddling with a brand new watch on his wrist. It looked like the gift was supposed to be from me. But I didn't give him anything. He said, since we've been together for so long, of course, she still loves me. It turned out he invited me to solidify this notion. Fortunately, I was there precisely to settle this. One of his friends spotted me and cheerfully called out, Helen's here. Make some room for her. No need, I said, I'll just stand for a bit and leave soon. Eric's face darkened for a moment. Helen, come sit. I didn't move and instead addressed everyone while standing. Since there are so many people here, I want to make things clear today. Eric and I have completely broken up. I've already posted a video in our group chat explaining the reasons. Feel free to watch. The group initially consisted of just me, Eric, and a few close friends. Over time, it expanded to several hundred people. And the video I posted was of Eric passionately kissing his first love. We did spend time together. I didn't want our relationship to end so badly. But he kept pushing me, so I had no choice. I scanned the room. From now on, don't associate me with Eric again. Otherwise, don't blame me for getting hostile. Everyone was shocked. One person, though, couldn't keep quiet. Cut the act. Weren't you just in Eric's arms, weak from his kisses a few days ago? I picked up a full glass of wine and walked over. I poured it over his head. What's so brave about speaking up? You. Before he could finish, I grabbed a handful of peanuts and shoved them into his mouth. The person in Eric's photos isn't me. Ask him who it is. Any other questions? The room fell silent, except for the sound of the guy spitting out peanut shells. Having made my point, I turned to leave. Eric followed me out. He grabbed me and pushed me against the wall. Then he pinned my arms and legs. I couldn't move. In such a hurry to find someone? Simon, maybe? I coldly stared at him, waiting for him to release me. He chuckled. Do you really think you stand a chance with Simon? Look at this. It was a photo in Simon's wallet. Everyone says this is Simon's first love. Doesn't she look a lot like you? You thought he genuinely wanted you around? He's using you as a substitute. Helen, he caressed my cheek. Why don't you understand? Only I truly love you. Everything I did was to bring you back to me. I silently walked downstairs. To my surprise, I saw Simon. He stood tall beside his car. When he saw me, he immediately put out his cigarette. For a moment, I hesitated to approach him. Seeing me hesitate, he walked towards me. As he got closer, I took a step back. His voice was hoarse. No matter what, let me take you home first. It's late, and it's not safe for you to be alone. The ride was silent. He insisted on seeing me to my door. As he was leaving, I stopped him. Simon, I tugged on his coat. The photo in your wallet. What's the story? The air seemed to freeze for a moment. Simon looked flustered. The girl in the photo wore a cyberpunk outfit. She had braided hair, smoky makeup, and large, irregular earrings. She looked a lot like me. But anyone familiar with me wouldn't mistake her for me. They would only say she resembled me. Even Eric. That's because my life has always been that of a good girl and a stellar student. School uniforms and white dresses were my go-to outfits. Teachers and relatives praised my obedience, and even my parents were pleased with me. In everyone's eyes, I seemed never to rebel, like a train that never derailed. It was hard for anyone to connect the girl in the photo with me. But actually, that girl was me. So, it wasn't about being a substitute. That was me back in high school. When the academic pressure became too much, I used after-school tutoring as an excuse to secretly join a band. We often performed in neighboring cities. I knew no one would support me, so I kept it a secret. But those were the happiest times of my life. I even gained a small fan base. Among them, there was one who followed every performance. Since I joined, he would send me handwritten letters and photos from each show. I never knew who he was. After the band disbanded, we lost contact. He was a special note in my rebellious symphony, not often mentioned but forever remembered. Until I saw this photo. I recognized it right away. It was one of the photos that Fan took of me back in the day. Eric didn't know that girl was me. He thought showing me the photo would make me dislike Simon. But it backfired and brought me an unexpected surprise. Why didn't you tell me that person was you? Simon said, there were many fans who liked you back then. I was just one among many. Idiot, I choked up a bit, of course not. At first, lots of people scolded me, saying I sang horribly. Only you praised me from beginning to end. Every time I got bashed, I'd see your letters and think, there's still you listening. It's not too bad. When I saw Eric pull out that photo, it confirmed my feelings for Simon even more. My ears burned, and I took the initiative to hook my arms around his neck, tentatively and actively kissing his lips. Simon, thank you for always being with me. The next second, Simon took charge. He grabbed my wrists and pinned them above my head, kissing me fiercely and dominantly. The cramped couch turned into a battlefield. Clothes scattered everywhere. His burning body enveloped me completely, calling my name over and over, Helen. The rhythm slowed and quickened like waves. A huge fish plunged into the water, swimming slowly and tortuously for a long time. He was doing it on purpose. I bit my lip, gripping his arm. Simon. He looked at me, an unruly smile tugging at his lips. What are you thinking? Tell me. With my flushed face, I leaned close to his ear and whispered 3 words. Simon let out a low hum, veins popping on his forehead. Helen, you'll regret this. That night, when he carried me directly from the couch, I knew I had made a big mistake. On Valentine's Day, the bar was full of lovey-dovey couples. Eric sat there with a dark face, drinking continuously. He didn't understand why Helen wouldn't come back to him after knowing she was a stand-in. At first, when he found that photo in Simon's wallet, he thought it was Helen. But he then realized it wasn't. Helen was a good girl from childhood, she wouldn't play in a band. He thought, if he could find a stand-in for Helen, perhaps Simon also saw Helen as someone else's stand-in. So, he told her about it, just to wait for her to come back to him. The first day, he was confident, waiting for Helen's call. But he didn't get it. After a week, he found he was still on Helen's blacklist. He thought about forcing her to come back, so he started high-profile relationships with various girls to make her jealous. But now, a month had passed, and there was still no reaction from Helen. He didn't know what went wrong. Gavin coaxed him, why don't you call her and ask? Who the hell wants to call her? Eric, prideful, retorted, I kindly reminded her Simon's no good. Now you want me to call and beg her to come back? Fine, if she wants to cry when she realizes she's been duped, let her. But in the next moment, he took out his phone and called Helen. Alright, for the sake of how much she used to love me, I'll give her one last chance. When the call came, Simon and I had just returned from the hospital. We were both in a daze. The doctor's words were still ringing in my ears. How can you still be so careless when you're already a month pregnant? Luckily, the baby was fine. But for the first 3 months, we had to be extra careful, or we'd regret it as parents. I was pregnant. Coming to my senses, I vented my frustration by punching Simon. This is all your fault. Simon was clearly happy, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yes, it's all my fault, but back home, the nausea hit me again, leaving me pale. Simon felt helpless, but apart from comforting me, there was little he could do. While he was fretting, Eric called. Helen, you can still come back now. I can break up with her. He thought I'd be jealous of his recent high-profile relationship with a sweet college girl. But hearing his voice made my nausea worse. Before I could say anything, Simon grabbed the phone. While soothing my back, he said, Helen's pregnant. Stop bothering her. On the other end, Eric froze. Coming to his senses, he kicked over a table full of bottles. Simon. You stole my woman. But the call had already ended, and his number was blocked when he tried calling again. Gavin, scared, asked him what happened. Eric's eyes were hollow. Late at night, Simon answered Helen's phone. He said Helen is pregnant. He has to be lying, right? Gavin dared not answer because he thought it was true. No, Eric shook his head, it must be fake. Helen knows she's a stand-in. With her pride, she wouldn't stay with Simon. She must still be lying to me, unsatisfied with my recent actions. I should listen to you. Yes, I should talk to her nicely. I'll buy a gift to coax her. To take care of me better, Simon suggested I move in with him. I thought it made sense, so I planned to go home to get some clothes today. When I arrived, I saw Eric holding a gift box and a bouquet, standing at my door. Helen, I'm sorry, he apologized as soon as he saw me. I've been so reckless and excessive lately. But no matter what, it was all because I love you. Can you forgive me? Look, he handed me the gift box. I bought you the pendant you always wanted. This necklace was what I planned to wear with the wedding dress on our wedding day. A month before the wedding, during the dress fitting, I had mentioned wanting to buy this pendant. He had agreed back then. But 3 days before the wedding, I asked him where the pendant was. Eric said, I've been really busy and forgot. Don't you have a lot of necklaces? Just wear one of those instead, okay? I felt bad for him being so busy, so I didn't make an issue out of it. Looking back now, maybe the pendant was a sign. A sign that he wasn't the right one for me. I laughed bitterly. What am I even doing with it now? If there's nothing else, you can leave. Helen, he said, his eyes filled with a crazy obsession. I know you've always been upset about that night before our wedding. I slept with Jessie, right? It wouldn't have happened if she hadn't seduced me. How about I make her apologize to you? He dragged Jessie out from the emergency exit, her mouth gagged. He pulled her hair and slammed her head against the wall. Will this make you happy, Helen? Can you forgive me now? Eric looked completely deranged. I didn't dare make any sudden moves. I texted the police and contacted Gavin without Eric noticing. Seeing me remain silent, Eric suddenly slapped himself twice. I was wrong too. I shouldn't have betrayed you. I'm sorry, Helen. Can you forgive me? Helen, come back to me. He started walking toward me. Instinctively, I covered my belly and stepped back. This action seemed to trigger him. He stared at my belly intently. Are you really pregnant with Simon's baby? I told you. He's just using you as a stand-in. Why would you rather be someone's stand-in than get back together with me? His voice grew louder, causing the sensor light to turn on. But it's okay. Suddenly, he smiled. Helen, we don't need this baby. We'll have our own. I wanted to run, but he was faster. He grabbed my shoulders and pushed me against the wall. I couldn't move. Helen, be good. It won't hurt for long. He tightened his fist and aimed at my belly. At this moment, neither the police nor Simon could save me in time. I closed my eyes in despair. A heavy thud sounded. The pain I expected didn't come. I opened my eyes to see Eric with blood streaming down his forehead, slowly collapsing to the ground. Behind him stood Jessie, holding a fire extinguisher. While Eric was talking, Jessie had been trying to free her hands. When he aimed his fist at my belly, she succeeded and picked up the fire extinguisher to save me. Thank you, I gasped, exhausted, using the last of my strength to show my gratitude. I owe you one, Jessie replied, setting the extinguisher aside and leaning against the wall to wait for the police. My nerves were on edge until Simon arrived. At that moment, I didn't plan to cry, but tears just started flowing. Simon held me tightly. It's over now. I'm sorry, Helen. I'm late. Eric was taken away by the police and sentenced to prison. As for Jessie, Simon asked me how I wanted to handle it. I would never forgive her for the affair. But she did save me. Don't want to owe her, I said. So Simon found Jessie and gave her $500,000. She gladly accepted. Simon threw a grand wedding for me. He handled most of the preparations himself. All I had to do was stay at home and decide on things. Later, I asked Simon why there were rumors that he liked men at first. Simon said, too many people were curious about my love life, so rumors spread both true and false. I never clarified, so people believed them. But, he kissed me on the lips. Do you know which rumor I like the most? Which one? They said the photo in my wallet is of my first love. Back then, it wasn't you. But now, it is. Not a rumor, but truly his Helen. From then on, he would love her with all his heart.